During a discussion about President Biden's administration, a MAGA Fox News panel that included Sean Hannity and Tommy Lauren were visibly shocked and triggered when their liberal colleague, Jessica Tarlov, said that Joe Biden's actually been a pretty good president and listed off a number of legislative and executive accomplishments that they couldn't contend with. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a clip or two to look at here, and I want to start with this one because it's pretty fun. As you know, in a few days, President Biden will leave the presidency and Donald Trump will return to it, and that marks a pretty ominous time for the future of this nation. So, of course, Fox is taking a victory lap. They're delighted that their cult leader is returning to power. And of course, the question turns to how good of a president was Joe Biden. Of course, pretty much everybody at Fox thinks he's the worst thing ever, the worst president ever. But Jessica Tarlov, who's smarter than all of them combined, had a different answer, and this is what she had to say.
All of you, I shudder to start with Jessica, but I always appreciate her honesty. What grade will you give Joe and Kamala for their time in office?
A B, I guess.
A B?
Yeah.
Oh, for brutal. B?
I'm a perfectionist, so that would upset me if I had gotten a B.
A B for bad?
No.
You're not grading on a normal scale?
Listen,
a B for very bad.
I do not think that when people look back at the Biden-Harris administration that it is going to be at this 65% disapproval level. There is a lot that has been done for the country through things like the PACT Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. They're very, very, very good for this country. But there's no doubt they're leaving in a cloud of disapproval. So what do you want from me?
Yeah. All right. Tommy Lauren, all of you.
So again, disbelief from Joe Concha and Tommy Lauren and Sean Hannity seemingly triggered by the notion that Biden has been a good president. And listen, we're going to actually read an article by Jessica Tarlov that she published today, as a matter of fact, to corroborate what she had to say during that Hannity special. And I should also say, again, Jessica Tarlov has the hardest job in legacy media. I'm a big fan of hers. I think there are very few people who are as agile, well-versed in the facts, well-researched, who could handle an environment like this. Fox is notoriously biased. They had to pay $787 million to settle a defamation suit against Dominion Voting Systems for, spreading defamatory election lies. We've never seen that staggering level of political bias from CNN or MSNBC, who are also politically biased, to be sure, just not as bad as Fox. She's always outnumbered 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, and yet she more than holds her own. And she, again, expounds on her position during that Hannity thing in this op-ed on Fox. Tarlov, 11 Biden accomplishments we can't ignore as Trump takes office. She says, this week I hopped on a train and headed down to D.C. to cover Donald Trump's second inauguration. I'm excited. It's my first inauguration, and although my candidate of choice isn't being sworn in, I understand the gravity of the moment. If something has only happened 47 times in history, it's a big deal. It's an honor to be a part of it, no matter your politics. I respectfully disagree with Jessica here, given Donald Trump's character and his unique authoritarian impulses. If he were simply another Republican, then I might share the sentiment and, it's a form of civic patriotism, but Donald Trump is simply a breed apart. Anyway, that said, while we are in the midst of welcoming Donald Trump back to the White House, it's important to not lose sight of all that's been accomplished during the Biden-Harris administration. Here are 11 things on my list. And yes, I know his approval rating is at an all-time low and that the American people chose a different direction, but it doesn't change the facts on the ground. History will be far kinder to Joe Biden than you think, which is debatable, but I do think she makes an extremely important distinction here. So many times, before we get to this, I've had so many people who are either centrist or conservative, or they hate Biden for various reasons, and some of them actually understandable, again, we'll get to that, who cite his approval rating. Approval rating is a perception of is a measure of perception. It's a measure of popularity. Two things can be true at once, and they are not mutually exclusive. It's entirely possible to have had a president who did good things, and those good things not be recognized, or those good things not be appreciated at that time. It's popular to be a good president and an unpopular one. These two things are possible. Anyway, for starters, President Biden just announced a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. The deal is based on Biden's three-phase proposal that begins with the return Of the 33 Israeli and American hostages, that ends with a reconstruction plan for Gaza. Did Trump and his Israel envoy have an impact? For sure. But this was done on Biden's watch and with his negotiators. Now, again, that deal could collapse at any moment, and Trump does deserve some of the credit because he absolutely pressured the Israeli government to take the deal. And I'll also say, just as a matter of foreign policy, I understand principled objections of the Biden administration over foreign policy, particularly on Israel and Gaza. Mehdi Hassan and Kyle Kalinske, our friends of the show, and Waja Ali, have very principled objections to the Biden administration's management of that particular conflict. Okay, so again, just with those caveats. Starting number 2, consider the strength of the economic recovery he oversaw from a once-in-a-century pandemic that took over a million American lives. Today, the unemployment rate is at 4.1%, and President Biden has overseen the lowest end-of-term unemployment since President Clinton. GDP growth has been gangbusters and has been close to 3%. While inflation remains stubborn and ticked up slightly to 2.9% this month, underlying inflation trends slowed to 3.2%. And the stock market, the best it's ever been. Our recovery is the envy of the industrialized world, and that is indeed an objective fact. Number 3, none of that would have been possible without the American Rescue Act, which delivered most households $1,400 checks. No, Donald Trump did not give you that money, and expanded the child tax credit, which cut child poverty in half. $14 billion to distribute the remarkable COVID-19 vaccine and forgivable loans for small businesses. Democrats got us back on track. Also point out that enhanced child tax credit, Democrats, with the exception of Joe Manchin, voted to renew it, but Joe Manchin, one Democrat, and 50 Senate Republicans voted against it. So it is the Republicans' fault ultimately that this did not go through, because they hate Democrats more than they love protecting children. Number 4, one of the greatest areas of achievement was addressing healthcare costs for Americans. Through the Inflation Reduction Act, Medicare, the cost of insulin is capped at $35 for millions of seniors. There's now a $2,000 cap on out-of-pocket prescription drug prices under Medicare, saving 19 million Americans upwards of $400 a month. And let's not forget that Medicare can negotiate drug prices now, a Democratic goal for years that finally became a reality under Biden. I'll also point out it was a Trump goal. Trump campaigned on allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. He failed. Biden succeeded. Here's another area, apples to apples comparison, where Biden succeeded, where Trump failed. Is it infrastructure week yet? It certainly was. Biden's bipartisan infrastructure deal will revolutionize America's roads and bridges. High-speed rail won't be a pipe dream anymore. Broadband for everyone, even rural Americans. Ports and waterways will get the attention they've needed for decades, and our cybersecurity will get the upgrades it so desperately needs. Good, high-paying union jobs are making all this possible, and of course, it will take time for all of it to come to life, but this deal set in motion is monumental for the country. And again, Trump promised for 4 years to deliver a sweeping infrastructure bill, even when he controlled not just the White House, but both chambers of Congress and the Supreme Court. He failed. Biden got it done in less than 1 year. Once again, an apples-to-apples comparison proving the objective superior governance of the Biden administration compared to the Trump. Number 6, the CHIPS and Science Act is one of the only major Biden accomplishments that Republicans will admit is a good thing. Historic investment in manufacturing that's led to hundreds of thousands of new jobs and real strengthening of our national security makes the CHIPS a marquee piece of legislation. We don't need to turn to China for our chips anymore, a major win for U.S. supremacy and safety. Number 7, although it largely flew under the radar, the PACT Act is a tremendous piece of legislation that expanded Veterans Affairs benefits and care to veterans who were exposed to 23 respiratory illnesses and cancers related to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxins. In just 2 years, over 1 million PACT Act claims have been granted, and nearly 900,000 veterans are receiving the disability benefits they so rightly deserve. Okay? I'll also point out that this was initially bipartisan, and then Republicans opposed it to try to stick it to Democrats and deprive President Biden of a political victory. But eventually, internal and external pressure from the likes of even Jon Stewart pressured Republicans to get behind it, and President Biden was able to sign it into law. 8, 9, 10, 11. There's so much more to tout, like the historic investment in HBCUs, which are historically black colleges and universities, 235 federal judges, which have been confirmed, saving tens of thousands of union pensions. By the way, a big one for Teamsters, which is why it's so offensive that Sean O'Brien, the leader of the Teamsters at the federal level, was not nearly as praiseworthy towards the Democratic Party, because the Teamsters pensions even conservative Teamsters members. Their pensions were saved not because of Trump, not because of Republicans, but because of Biden and the Democrats. And unfortunately, that loyalty was not rewarded. The way it should work for politics is you support a politician because they get you the things that you need. They make a commitment to you, they deliver on that commitment, and then you vote for them again. It's a transactional element. You vote for them, demanding results. They give you the results, you vote for them again. And unfortunately, so many, not all, but so many union members in this country prioritized culture war issues over material goods because it is simply an objective reality. It is a fact. It's not a matter of opinion. Democrats deliver more material benefit to unions in this country than Republicans do. And if you're really motivated by material benefit and not culture war bullshit, you'd vote Democrat. So again, that's my spiel on that. And crucially, the first major piece of gun safety legislation in decades. Taken together, it's hard to see how, with time, Biden's 4 years in office won't be seen as having delivered in real and substantive ways for Americans. Is he going on Mount Rushmore? I doubt it. But the minimization of what he's done for this country wildly betrays the reality of his legacy. And there's no doubt that Trump is going to benefit enormously from the Biden agenda in his first 2 years in office. She is 100% correct. Donald Trump is going to do everything in his power, as he did in his first term with President Obama, to take credit for everything President Biden accomplished domestically. And unfortunately, I am not convinced that the media or even elected Democrats will push back on this vocally and factually enough. The mainstream media, every time Trump takes credit for the lowering of prescription drug prices or Medicare negotiating prescription drug prices, many of these things going into effect this year, and Trump will be president this year, the media should say, well, actually, Mr. Republican, Mr. Trump, whoever they're talking to, that actually wasn't as a consequence of your action. That was a process negotiated under the Biden administration. You don't even have to make it the entire purpose of your interview, but it's key that the media fact check this, and then elected Democrats should relentlessly fact check this. No, this isn't done because of Trump. It was done because of Democrats. Facts don't speak for themselves, and this is what Jessica Tarlov is getting at. It's so important for honest brokers, for elected representatives, and certainly journalists to fact check and defend the facts as they are, because facts don't speak for themselves, and Democrats really need to start understanding that. The people will not magically know that it was President Biden who got this done. They will not know that. So we have to speak truth to power. We have to speak facts to the American people. And when you do that, certainly on domestic issues, there's just no denying that President Biden has been an objectively good president on domestic issues. And anyone who tells you otherwise simply doesn't know the record or is politically motivated to lie to your face. Food for thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.